The gentle cry for help. The crystal spires of Lumina caught the light of 3 suns and scattered it into rainbow patterns that danced across the peaceful valleys below. Elder Vex-High stood in his meditation chamber high above the city, his translucent blue form shimmering as he absorbed the harmonious energy that flowed through every Zephyrian settlement. For 12,000 years, his people had known only peace. That peace shattered with the first explosion. The crystal tower beside his chamber cracked and began to fall, its musical resonance turning into a death scream as tons of living crystal crashed into the streets below. Vex-High pressed his palms against the viewing wall and watched in horror as black ships descended from the sky like mechanical vultures. Their hulls were scarred and brutal, covered in spikes and weapon ports. It spoke of a culture built on violence. Elder Vex-High. Crystal singer Neela burst into the chamber, her normally calm aura flickering with panic. The young Zephyrian's ability to commune with their living crystal technology made her invaluable to their communication networks. The orbital defense platforms are gone, all of them, destroyed in the first wave. Vex-High turned from the window, his ancient mind struggling to process concepts his species had abandoned millennia ago. Who are they? What do they want? They call themselves the Kraxan Horde, Neela replied, her fingers dancing over a floating crystal interface. Their transmission is simple. They want our world. They want us gone. Through the chamber walls, the sound of the city's crystal song began to change. The harmonious tones that had marked Zephyrian civilization for countless generations were being replaced by discordant notes of fear and pain. Buildings designed to sing in harmony with their inhabitants now wailed as they were torn apart by weapons fire. Our defense fleet? Vex-High asked, though he already knew the answer. Gone. Admiral Kethanol made his stand at the third moon. His ships were beautiful, Elder. They maintained perfect formation even as they died. Nyla's voice cracked. The Kraxans have no appreciation for beauty. They simply destroyed everything. Vex-High moved to the central communication crystal, a towering formation that connected their city to every other settlement on Lumina. The crystal pulsed with distress signals from across the planet. 73 cities reporting attacks. 41 cities no longer responding at all. How long do we have? He asked. Their ground forces will reach the capital within 6 hours, Neela reported. But Elder, there might be another option. She activated a new display, showing a sector of space far from Zephyrian territory. 3 cycles ago, our deep space sensors detected advanced technology signals from this region. Complex mathematical patterns, scientific data, cultural transmissions. They appeared to be a spacefaring civilization. Vex-High studied the data. The signals showed remarkable sophistication, suggesting a species with advanced physics and engineering capabilities. Have we attempted contact? The distance is too great for normal communication. But we could use the emergency broadcast array. Send a concentrated signal through hyperspace. It would reach them within hours. And if they are hostile like the Kraxans? Neela's form flickered with desperate hope. Elder, what choice do we have? The Kraxans have made their intentions clear. If these distant beings have developed such advanced technology, perhaps they value knowledge and cooperation as we do. Another explosion shook the tower. Through the walls, they could hear the crystal song of their city, growing weaker as more buildings fell. The Kraxans were methodical in their destruction, taking particular pleasure in silencing the harmonic frequencies that gave Zephyrian settlements their unique beauty. Draft the message, Vex-High decided. Make it clear that we are a peaceful people under attack by an aggressive force. Ask for humanitarian assistance and any help they can provide. Neela worked quickly, her connection to the communication crystals, allowing her to compose the transmission at the speed of thought. The message included star charts, cultural data, and detailed information about the Kraxan assault. It painted a picture of a gentle civilization facing extinction at the hands of merciless invaders. "The signal is ready," she announced. "But Elder, once we send this, there's no taking it back. We'll be announcing our existence to a completely unknown species." Vex High looked out at his dying city. Streams of refugees fled through the crystal. Gardens, their own forms flickering with terror as they sought shelter that no longer existed. Children who had never known violence clung to parents who had no weapons to defend them. "Send it," he commanded. The emergency array powered up with a sound like crystal, singing in harmony with the stars themselves. Energy built within the transmission. Crystals until they glowed brighter than the three suns above. Then, in a flash of pure light, the message launched into hyperspace, carrying the desperate plea of an entire civilization toward the edge of known space. 1,200 light years away, the signal reached a small monitoring station orbiting Earth's outer colonies. Lieutenant Sarah Webb was finishing her shift when the computers began processing the impossible transmission. She had been monitoring deep space communications for 3 years and had never seen anything like it. "Command, this is deep space." "Station 7, she reported, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "We have a priority 1 contact situation. I'm receiving what appears to be an alien distress signal." Within minutes, the transmission was bouncing between military networks across human space. Admiral Sarah Chon received the decoded message. While reviewing fleet deployments in her command center on Luna Base, the 50-year-old veteran had spent her entire career preparing for the day humanity would encounter other spacefaring species. She had expected first contact to be exploration vessels or trading missions. Instead, they were witnessing genocide. "Analysis confirms the transmission's authenticity," reported her intelligence officer, Commander Park. "Mathematical proofs and scientific data are consistent with a genuinely alien origin. Based on the signal patterns, they appear to be significantly more advanced than us in several areas." Chun studied the translated message on her display. The Zephyrians had included cultural files showing their art, their philosophy, their commitment to peaceful cooperation. They were everything humanity hoped to find among the stars, a species that had moved beyond warfare to build something beautiful, and they were being murdered by something called the Kraxan Horde. "Ma'am," General Marcus Stone entered the command center, his weathered face grim. The leader of the Terran Space Marines had built his reputation fighting pirates and rebels in the outer colonies. "I've reviewed the tactical data. This Kraxan force has already destroyed 17 Zephyrian worlds. Based on their fleet movements, they're conducting total extermination campaigns." Chun activated the main tactical display, showing the Zephyrian star system. Red indicators marked Kraxan fleet positions, while blue dots showed remaining Zephyrian settlements. The pattern was clear. The Kraxans were systematically destroying everything the peaceful aliens had built. "What's our response capability?" she asked. Dot Stone pulled up a force deployment screen. "The 3rd Fleet is completing exercises near Proxima Station. 2 carriers, 8 destroyers, 4 heavy cruisers, and full marine complement. We could have them at the Zephyrian system within 72 hours. Against an unknown alien military. Force using unfamiliar technology? Ma'am, respectfully, that's what we trained for. The Zephyrians have provided detailed intelligence on Kraxan ships and tactics. Their energy weapons appear similar to our plasma systems. Their armor uses conventional materials. Most importantly, they don't expect resistance. They've been fighting pacifists for months." Chun studied the files the Zephyrians had transmitted. Images of crystal cities being turned to slag. Refugee ships destroyed as they fled. An entire species being erased because they refused to fight back. "The Defense Council will want to debate this for weeks," she said quietly. Stone nodded. "While more Zephyrian civilians die every day." "Ma'am, We have the ships, and we have the firepower. The Kraxans are committing genocide against a species that sent us art and music, along with their plea for help. The Admiral stood and walked to the main viewing screen, which showed Earth floating peacefully in the void. Humanity had spent centuries fighting each other before finally learning to cooperate. They had built their space fleet not for conquest, but for exploration and defense. Now, for the first time, they faced a clear moral choice. Send the deployment order, Chun decided. Full battle group to the Zephyrian system. Mission parameters are humanitarian intervention and protection of civilian populations. And if the Kraxans resist? Chun's expression hardened. General, the Zephyrians asked for help. They're going to get it. Across human space, the Third Fleet began powering up their engines. The carrier Indomitable led the formation, her fighter, bays loaded with the most advanced aerospace craft humanity had ever built. The destroyers Fury, Relentless, and Guardian took escort positions while marine assault ships prepared to deploy thousands of the toughest soldiers Earth had ever produced. Admiral Chun established a secure communication link with the Zephyrian system, hoping their message would reach Elder Vexhai before it was too late. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Terran Defense Force. She transmitted across the void. We received your distress call. Help is coming. Hold on. In his crystal tower on Lumina, Elder Vexhai received the message as Kraxan ground forces entered his city's outer districts. The reply was in a language he didn't recognize, but the translation systems worked quickly to decode its meaning. The beings they had contacted weren't sending supplies or defensive equipment. They were sending warriors. The Death World's answer. The space above Luminator open like fabric being ripped apart. Reality twisted and folded as massive shapes emerged from hyperspace, their hulls dark and angular against the star field. Elder Vexhai watched from his tower as the impossible became real. The distant species had answered their call for help, but these were not the peaceful explorers the Zephyrians had expected. The lead ship stretched, nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapon ports and armor plating that spoke of a species intimately familiar with warfare. Smaller vessels took positions around it in a formation that any military strategist would recognize as a combat deployment. These beings had not come to negotiate. By the 3 suns, whispered Crystal Singer Nyla, her form flickering with awe and terror. What manner of creatures build such things? The Kraxan fleet, which had seemed so intimidating just hours before, suddenly looked primitive by comparison. Their ships were brutal and effective, but they lacked the technological sophistication evident in the human vessels. Where Kraxan ships relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers, these newcomers displayed precision engineering and advanced tactical thinking. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display that showed both alien fleets in detail. The Kraxan formation was aggressive, but predictable. They had been fighting defenseless civilizations for so long that they had grown sloppy. Her analysis computers were already identifying weak points in their battle line. Mom, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian capital, reported Communications Officer Lin. Audio only, translated through our xenolinguistics protocols. Put it through. Elder Vexhai's voice filled the bridge, carrying undertones of desperation mixed with cautious hope. Unknown vessels. This is Elder Vexhai of the Zephyrian Coalition. We transmitted a request for humanitarian assistance. Are you the ones who answered our call? Chun activated the communication system. Elder Vexhai, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress signal and are here to provide assistance. Can you give us current tactical information on the hostile forces? There was a pause before the Zephyrian Elder replied. Admiral, we are grateful for your response. but we must inform you that we are a peaceful species. We have no experience with military tactics or combat strategy. We were hoping for medical supplies, perhaps refugee transportation. Elder, we've analyzed your situation. The Kraxan forces have been conducting systematic extermination of your population. Medical supplies won't stop orbital bombardment. What you need is for someone to remove the threat. Another pause, longer this time. When Vex-High spoke again, his voice carried a note of confusion. Remove the threat? Admiral, we don't understand. Are you suggesting violence? General Stone, monitoring the conversation from his command ship, couldn't help but shake his head. The Zephyrians were so committed to pacifism that they couldn't even conceptualize self-defense. Meanwhile, their cities were burning, and their people were dying. Elder, Shun said carefully, sometimes peace can only be preserved through strength. The Kraxans have made their intentions clear. They won't stop until your species is extinct. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. On Lumina's surface, Vex-High was struggling to understand what these newcomers were proposing. The concept of using violence to prevent violence seemed paradoxical to his philosophical framework. Yet as he looked out at his burning city, he could see Kraxan ground forces systematically destroying everything his people had built over millennia. What are you planning to do? He asked quietly. We're going to stop them, Chun replied simply. Kraxan fleet had been aware of the human arrival, but hadn't considered them a serious threat. In their experience, most species either fled or attempted futile negotiations when faced with Horde forces. Warlord Grexstar, commanding the assault from his flagship Bloodfang, viewed the newcomers as nothing more than additional targets. New ships have entered the system, reported his tactical officer. 17 vessels in unknown configuration. Grexstar studied the display with predatory interest. The newcomer ships were impressively large, but he had destroyed larger vessels belonging to other species. Size meant nothing without the will to use it effectively. Composition and armament? Unknown, Warlord. The ships are maintaining defensive positions. No aggressive movement detected. Hail them, Grexstar decided. Let them know they can flee now, or be destroyed with the Zephyrians. The communication came through clearly on the Indomitable's bridge. Grexstar's voice was harsh and guttural, filled with the confidence of someone who had never encountered serious resistance. Unknown vessels, this is Warlord Grexstar of the Kraxan Horde. You have entered a military conquest zone. Withdraw immediately or face destruction alongside the Crystal Singers. Admiral Chun looked around her bridge at officers who had spent their careers preparing for exactly this moment. Humanity's first contact with hostile alien life was unfolding exactly as their worst-case scenarios had predicted. The galaxy contained species that viewed other intelligent life as nothing more than obstacles to expansion. Open a channel, she ordered. Warlord Grexstar, this is Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You are engaged in the systematic extermination of a peaceful civilization. Cease your attacks immediately and withdraw from Zephyrian space. Grexstar's laughter echoed across the communication link. Terrans? Another weak species come to watch the Crystal Singers die? You amuse me, Admiral. Watch from a safe distance if you wish, but do not interfere. This is your final warning, Warlord. Withdraw now or face the consequences? Consequences? Grexstar's tone turned threatening. I have conquered 47 worlds, destroyed a dozen species, and scattered their ashes across the void. What consequences could you possibly offer? Chun's expression hardened. She had hoped for a peaceful resolution, but the Kraxan commander had made his position clear. General Stone, you are authorized to commence Operation Sanctuary. All ships, weapons free. Protect the Zephyrian population by any means necessary. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. The human ships, which had seemed almost peaceful in their defensive formations, suddenly revealed their true nature. Weapon ports opened along their hulls like the eyes of awakening predators. Fighter craft poured from the carrier bays in precisely coordinated swarms. The destroyers and cruisers moved into attack positions with the fluid grace of apex predators. Grextar had just enough time to realize his mistake before the first human weapons fired. Plasma bolts and particle beams lanced across space with devastating accuracy. The human targeting systems, designed to engage enemies at extreme range with minimal collateral damage, found the Kraxan ships woefully inadequate. Where Kraxan tactics relied on overwhelming force and close-range brutality, human doctrine emphasized precision strikes and technological superiority. The first salvo crippled 6 Kraxan vessels and destroyed 3 more outright. The second salvo, arriving before the Kraxans could even return fire, eliminated their command ship and scattered the remaining fleet. "Impossible," whispered Grextar as his flagship broke apart around him. "No species fights like this. No one builds such weapons." His communication array was failing, but he managed to send one final transmission to Horde Command. "Beware the Terrans. They are not like the others. They are death itself." On the surface of Lumina, Elder Vex-High watched the brief battle with amazement and horror. The newcomers had destroyed the entire Kraxan fleet in less than 10 minutes with casualties so minimal they barely registered on his sensors. The efficiency was breathtaking and terrifying. "Elder," came Admiral Chun's voice over the communication link, "we're deploying ground forces to eliminate remaining Kraxan troops and secure your population centers. Our Marines are experienced in urban warfare and civilian protection." "Marines?" Vex-High asked weakly. "Professional soldiers trained specifically for this type of operation. They'll work to minimize damage to your cities while removing the threat." Transport ships descended from the human fleet like metal rain. From their bellies emerged warriors encased in powered armor that made them look like mechanical giants. These Terran Marines moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of extensive combat experience. General Stone led the first wave personally, his enhanced armor allowing him to leap between crystal spires as his men secured landing zones throughout the capital. The Kraxan ground forces, designed to terrorize helpless civilians, found themselves facing opponents who had been forged in the crucible of the Death World's endless conflicts. The battle was even more one-sided than the space engagement. Kraxan weapons that had been devastating against unarmored Zephyrians barely scratched human combat suits. Kraxan tactics that relied on intimidation and fear failed completely against Marines who had been trained to fight in environments that would kill most species simply by existing. Within 4 hours, organized Kraxan resistance had been eliminated. The survivors were either dead or fleeing in whatever transport vessels remained functional. General Stone stood in the central plaza of the Zephyrian capital, surrounded by crystal architecture that sang with relief and gratitude. "Admiral, the surface is secure," he reported. "Kraxan forces have been neutralized. Beginning refugee assistance and medical aid distribution." Elder Vex-High emerged from his tower to meet these strange saviors face to face. The human soldiers were removing their helmets, revealing faces that were surprisingly gentle despite belonging to the most effective warriors he had ever witnessed. "Admiral Chun," he said as the human commander approached, "we don't know how to thank you, but we must ask, your people, your species, you are warriors, aren't you?" Chun nodded slowly. "Our world taught us to fight, Elder. We've known war and conflict for thousands of years. But we learned something important along the way. Sometimes you have to fight to protect those who can't fight for themselves. But the violence, the destruction, how do you reconcile this with peaceful coexistence?" "Elder, peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is what happens when good people are willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Your people created something beautiful here. The Kraxans wanted to destroy it, simply because they could. We couldn't let that happen. Vexhai looked around at his saved city, at the human soldiers helping Zephyrian civilians, at the peaceful sky no longer filled with hostile ships. For the first time in his long life, he began to understand that there were different kinds of strength. Perhaps, he said quietly, we have much to learn from each other. Admiral Chun smiled. Elder, that's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. As the twin suns set over Lumina, the crystal cities began to sing again. But now their song included new harmonies, the sound of a peaceful species learning that sometimes the greatest gift the universe can offer is someone willing to fight for your right to remain peaceful. The alliance between humanity and the Zephyrians would grow to become one of the strongest bonds in the galaxy. The Zephyrians provided wisdom, culture, and advanced technology, while humanity offered protection and the hard-won knowledge that peace was worth defending. And across the galaxy, other aggressive species began to hear whispers of the Terrans, the Deathworlders who answered cries for help with overwhelming force and perfect precision. The species that didn't conquer or dominate, but simply ensured that those who chose peace could keep it. The message was clear. Call for help, and Earth would send its deadliest warriors. Not to destroy, but to protect. Not to conquer, but to preserve. Because sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is be absolutely terrifyingly good at war.